how do you determine that, like, especially with those clients that come in that are, like you said, like they don't have that set volume to begin with, like this, they're starting to work out. How do you determine that base level of, is it just sort of like you, I mean, I guess at this point you've been in it so long, you have a sense um, of
Uh,
what they can tolerate and what they can't.
so like I want to show people that they can do more than they think they can oftentimes. So I usually don't have a lot of resistance to just taking it slow with people. I start oftentimes with like a circuit that would be like squat, some type of push, some type of either hinge, could be like bridge type movement, like posterior chain, like lower body oriented type of action, some type of pull, and then, like some planking type of movement that would be more like kind of static core. And depending on the body type and body shape I have in front of me, and what might provoke, like I'll pick different movements to fit into those categories. But that's a really good way for me to get started with people, and then I just build volume there. I'll start with just no more than 5 reps, and then it becomes pretty obvious, like, okay, you can do more than that, so we do more than that. But like that's like a start, because you need to start with someone, and then you can see how quickly you can kind of progress people through. A lot of times my clientele is just so they're fearful of doing things that they haven't done before, and they're kind of at a certain age where they think that they shouldn't be doing something because they've heard they shouldn't at a certain age. So I just have to like show them that there's a starting point for them, and then we just go with their comfort level. But I'll tell you, like, it takes me a while, and I think we've talked about this before, till I actually like hit people's like true 1RM, because it's just so much about like they don't think they're ready, they don't think they're ready. So I'm just like taking them to that next step, weekly, every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's like with newer people, it's like I'm progressing them every session, because I know that they can already do more. They just they don't find it safe yet. So that every session I might be adding something like a rep, I might be adding like the next increment of weight. And then until they feel like I can tell that the movement has changed, right? Like they're either slowing the tempo down, or like the technique just doesn't look like it did for the regression right below that. But it may take a while until they actually aren't progressing every session, just because like we're starting so much below what they can actually do from a capacity standpoint. And that's fine. And then it becomes like everything sort of gains when you are a beginner, right? It's just, when you have to be okay with like taking a long time to actually get them to where their true starting point should be. And that's, it's a psychological thing, but that's all part of, what you're dealing with when you're dealing with a human being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like, how often, talking about 1RM, how often is one of the goals to push them towards that top intensity?
So I rarely do a 1RM unless somebody wants to after a certain amount of time. But like I'll do like rep maxes a lot, but I just tell people like leave 1 or 2 in the tank, like, you know what I mean? And I find that my clients are much less apprehensive to do that than they would be to just kind of like lift the next weight and keep moving up with weights. But it really depends on what people's background is with strength training, right? Mm-hmm. So I have some clients that have come from more of a strength training background. I almost have to pull them away from the 1RM and just be like, no, you need more conditioning. Like, who cares about your 1RM? You know what I mean? Like, type of thing, where it's like, let's do, like, I have the push system, which is like velocity based training, which you can actually create like a 1RM based on an estimated, like what was your max at some point in your life. Like, you do that and you do like 3 reps, but they look at the velocity in which you do those reps, and then they kind of calculate a 1RM, and then you can base programming off of that 1RM instead of like actually having to go through the process. So I've done that, and I've done that with myself, which I actually like to do for any type of like rack squatting. Not as much for deadlifting, but like, because I don't often have a spotter or anything like that, it's like, okay, that's the thing I'm going to look at, instead of it being like, when am I actually failing? Because I don't want to fail if I don't have a spotter, you know what I mean? I'm not even going to like mess with it really, but I can mess with going lighter and faster and then just seeing that progress. So I'll look at that, but I'm not really looking at 1RMs too often, because no one really cares. No one even knows what that is that I'm working with for the most part. The very few people do, but I will do like a rep max so I can get a sense of, this is how much you can do at this weight. And I like to show people like that, if we've been doing 5 reps for a while, like today, let's just do as many as you feel comfortable. And they might do like 12. Like, okay, so like we can do more than what you've been doing, right? And it's just sometimes like a nice eye opener for the client. And then I'll base, the rest of the sets for that session sometimes off of what they got in that rep max. So instead of it being 5 reps, now it might be, if they did 12, I might do 10. I might do descending ladders, right? Like just vary it that way. But it's just a different way for people to build like a resilience to weight, and kind of do more than they thought they could do.
Are you doing those within the same session, like that rep max and then essentially back off sets?
Yeah,
or is it like okay. I didn't know if you're doing it as like a final set and then
no, I usually do it as a first set if I'm going to do it, like after they've been warmed up in some other way. Just because I'm not like taking them to, and I'm telling them to like keep like 1 or 2 in the tank, but just to make sure that they feel fine with it. Like, I don't really even want to have to spot them. Like, I don't want the weight to be that heavy that like I'm assisting them up with it, at least for those type of work. So that they'll have more in the tank, especially to do a couple reps less than their maxes. But like I said, oftentimes, like if we've been doing sets of 5, they start getting comfortable with it, it'll be like 2 to 3 times the amount of reps that they were doing. And it sort of surprises them. So even if I do a drop set from that rep max, that's like 2 reps, they're still doing more than they were doing before. And that's like a good way for me to start mixing it up without having to go too heavy. And I think clients like tend to do well with that.
Yeah. I feel like I feel kind of the same way about my training. Like I feel like when I'm adding reps, it feels better than when, at least like mentally, it's less fatiguing than adding weight.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different experience in many ways. I think there is a point where like clients early on actually need to feel weight. So I don't like to, they're used to doing more reps than they should because they don't understand what strength training is, right? So it's like, just because you're holding weights doesn't mean you're doing strength training, right? Just because you're using some type of external load doesn't mean it's strength training, right? Like you have to be looking to actually kind of progressively be able to do more. And I have a lot of people that when their starting point from a strength training is they just have done the same routine that happens to incorporate weights for years. So they need to actually like understand the idea of within these low amount of reps, you have to do more weight. Right. And once that is happening for a certain amount of time and I don't feel like comfortable, or that you can tell like they're getting to where like adding weight would make them feel a little apprehensive, or it might make their technique a little sloppier than I'd like, that's when I'll just add the kind of idea of the rep max just to give them a sense of where they are. But then it also adds like a boost of confidence that they can do that next weight if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right.
I like it. Yeah.
The other thing that I think really works well from a volume standpoint, more from the cardiovascular realm, is just as soon as people are ready for it, to get them to use like heart rate monitors, like monitoring and tracking. I just think it's such a useful thing. It can take a while just to get people into that mindset though, where it's just like, they don't want to like add that extra step. But like the number one thing I think that I've done personally, but also just gotten with my clients to do, is just track their heart rate with a chest strap every workout. Whether it's like we're trying to actually use that as the thing that's the intent of the workout or not, it's just like you're collecting data. So a lot of people have weight loss goals, right? So you're collecting the data of how many calories you burn during that workout, right? And it just starts to spike this idea of like, I can do more and I want to do more because I can see this as like a caloric expenditure type of deal. But then you also see the difference between like what a strength training type of workout looks like. What does cardiovascular exercise actually mean? Well, it means that we have to be looking at a heart rate, and we have to have the heart rate as a goal for something, right? And then a lot of things that people didn't think were cardiovascular can turn into cardiovascular exercise, right? And I think it fits this idea, this continuum model really fits quite well. So for instance, if let's just say like I'm going to do like kettlebell snatches, right? And it could be any type of implement, but I'm going to use the kettlebell because I think the kettlebell works really well for cardio. And I'm just going to do like a weight that I can do like 2 times, and then I have to put it down, right? And it's a lot of work to do it 2 times. Like I'm not getting my heart rate up there. That's not a cardio workout because I need a rest break before I do another set, right? And this is the idea of strength training, right? Or power training, where it's like you need to put a ton of effort into not a lot of reps, and you need to take breaks and so that you can do it again and again. Like you don't have time there to get your heart rate is not going to stay elevated, right? You may get a little spike as you do the rep, but because you need the rest, it's going to come down, right? When you are strong though, right? So say I can do a kettlebell snatch at like 100 pounds, then I can take 50 pounds and I can make that a cardio bell. And I can do the same movements, take much less rest in between. I can do much more volume, and I can be looking at my heart rate and say, I want to do the reps to keep my heart rate at this place, which might be 70-75% of target heart rate, but whatever it is. Like I have the option to do that only because I've gotten strong enough to do the higher bell. So you can see the continuum unfold in many ways just by using a heart rate monitor and making that be the goal. And you can do that with a barbell. You can do that with I've been using that like the K pulley and the K box for that, where it's like, if I have a heavy wheel on that, right? Like I can't really move fast enough or do enough reps without my muscles giving out to keep my heart rate up. But if I go with the lighter one, it's basically like using like a rowing machine with certain movements. It's like I can go for a while, I can add power to it, and you see the combination of attributes that get your heart rate where you want it. And so it's kind of like a really cool process that makes what you're doing personal to you, but it also can be something that you're managing load, you're managing volume, you're managing intensity, all by just having that real-time feedback.
Honestly, I feel like it's like talking about a snatch. Like it's skill work too at that point.
Yeah.
Like you're just building volume at a submax load.
Right. Yeah. Well,
even though that's not the main intent, but
everything is skill work at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's like we might take some of that for granted, like that there are some simpler movements, but like for the beginner that's never squatted or never deadlifted, like getting up from doing a sit to stand from a chair is skill work, right? Early on, not even like picking something up, just doing a hip hinge is skill work, right? So it all starts as skill work. I just think like something like a clean or a snatch, there's just more positions that you have to transition through, right? So like you think of a deadlift, it's ground to waist, right? So depending on how you're doing a snatch, it might be ground, you have to reposition yourself to kind of get to like a high pull type of power position. Then you have to understand how to pull it, where the bar should be in relation to your body. And when you learn it, you break down a bunch of different positions in a way, right? And then eventually it just becomes like one smooth movement from the ground to overhead. But there are actually several positions that you have to be able to transition through quickly, or it ceases to be a snatch. It doesn't look like a snatch. And that's just because of the distance that the implement that you're doing has to travel. I think that similar when you're looking at get up type of activities. So even something like a burpee, which seems like such like a sloppy, like you just are on the ground and you get up, like there's a bunch of steps that you can break it down into, and then that it becomes something like there's something for everybody in that movement. But at the same time, it's skill work in many ways. And then it becomes something that you can flow through. It looks more skilled, but there's always like a way to break that down, right? So I think the only difference between like something like a deadlift and something like a clean or a snatch is just the implement that you're moving is transitioning through more positions. It's going through a greater excursion, right? And then there's a speed element that you can't get away from. Like you can't do a snatch slow or it's not a snatch, right? It's the same thing with a kettlebell swing. Like you can teach someone the hinge, but then when they actually do a kettlebell swing, it can't be slow. Like you can't pause. There's different places that you just have to be kind of flowing and going with momentum. And that's harder for people because there's more moving parts. So the speed element, along with like how much distance something is traveling, they just make the skill harder, but there's always skill work.